Good evening. Nice to see you, nice to be here. Trying to think in terms of what I might offer to encourage you. And I've been looking at your situation and considering what some of the strengths are. I thought of mirroring that back. Because I also have the perspective of having grown up in Australia the first 21 years of my life. And probably a lot of Singaporeans are what we might call faith types, who have faith in spiritual things. At least a lot of the people in this generation, middle-aged people, and that's a good thing. Having faith in spiritual practice, having faith in religious practices is, I would consider that to be your noble inheritance, the results of past good karmas. And I think that's quite evident in Singapore, reflected in the fact that almost anywhere you go, there's a beautiful temple not far away. This is I was speaking with a man, Brother Wang, who's been driving us around a bit, and he was also noticing that because of the generosity of the previous generations, offering land, building temples, many of these places in very central locations. And I've lived for periods of time in Australia, in England, and in America, and it's very much the case in those countries, developed liberal Western democracies, kind of secular cultures, that religion is something peripheral, something you keep to yourself, something you do on a Sunday perhaps. And for those of you who have faith in Lord Buddha, his Arahant disciples, the Bodhisattvas, etc., it's really your good fortune that you see these things around you, these images, as a reminder. It's tremendously helpful in a way that you might take for granted. And so I just wanted to mention to people, in terms of in the 5 spiritual powers, Lord Buddha, after he got enlightened under the Bodhi tree, he was somewhat in awe of the accomplishment, because he noticed that what he had discovered is difficult to penetrate, difficult to discover, difficult to experience, because it goes against the grain of the world. Everybody's committed to being a self and affected by greed, hatred and delusion, and it's the other shore, the bank on the other shore. And he was wondering, how did I accomplish this? How is this possible? Because it's such a rare accomplishment. And he could see that the 5 spiritual powers, 5 qualities, when made much of, when cultivated, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. At that time, Lord Buddha had established his mind in liberation. He was experiencing the deathless, another word for nibbana. And so the first of those spiritual powers is faith. And we have to have faith in the right thing. But faith is obviously important. Lord Buddha mentions it first as one of these 5 qualities that lead to enlightenment. So what do we need to have faith in? We have faith in the fact that Buddha did realize liberation, was capable of purifying his mind. So that's why he's our refuge. Also important to remember that that's our potential. When the Lord Buddha realized that, he was demonstrating the potential of conscious beings. And this is another thing I like to mirror back to Buddhists sometimes, that we're tremendously fortunate to be Buddhists, because our religion, the philosophy we study, the practices we do, they're actually incredibly affirming. When you go to the Buddha for refuge, you're also going to refuge to your potential. You're going for refuge to the truth. And when you go to refuge to the Dhamma, again, it's the truth and the path of practice and the way that leads to liberation. It's a very, very different message to original sin, being born inferior, having to pray to something superior in order to be forgiven. Lord Buddha has given us everything we need to become equal to him in his liberation. So we're actually extremely fortunate, and among the world's religions, it's the only one that is so affirming. But we need to, and again, this is our karmic inheritance, this is our good karma, this is our merit that's manifesting, that you've met the Buddha's teachings and you've met the Buddha's training, and we need to remind ourselves, because sometimes we're bowing to the statues, we're having faith in things externally, and we're not reminding ourselves, actually, what I'm really bowing to here is the potential for enlightenment, the potential to liberate the mind from greed, hatred and delusion, my own potential of conscious beings. That's what the Dharma is, that's what the Sangha is. The Sangha is those who have practiced rightly, practiced correctly, and realized the same liberation as the Buddha. So we can do that. But in order to be able to accomplish that, we do need to do quite a lot of practice. And this is where the faith is enormously helpful. Because when we have faith, a really, really good quality of faith, the next of the 5 spiritual powers is energy. Faith gives rise to energy. And then when you get this good energy, healthy energy, confidence, I have a refuge, liberation is possible, I have what I need, I have the practices, I have the teachings, then one can channel that energy into the next of the 5 spiritual powers, which is mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. And I do believe Lord Buddha put these 5 powers in this order for good reason. The emphasis on Lumpur Cha's training, as far as I could tell, is that the practice of right mindfulness, being mindful in all postures, cultivating mindfulness in formal meditation practices and chanting, listening to Dhamma, and then having the determination to carry that mindfulness throughout the day. That right mindfulness is what manifests as right concentration, samma samadhi. And with the right mindfulness and the right concentration, the mind then becomes ripe to see the world, the conditions, according to their true nature, and that's the wisdom. So I think for people in Singapore, you're in a good situation, very fortunate, in that you have your inheritance. Many of you were born Buddhists. You have the beautiful temples. You also have occasionally you have realized masters passing through, and it's never, in this country, it's never that great a distance to come and see them. So you can come to Wat Balelai and various places and hear Dhamma teachings from monks such as Lumpur Liam and Tanajana Nun and the senior disciples of Lumpur Cha. And I think sometimes we might take for granted or just forget how fortunate and how rare that is. And it's one recollects one's good fortune, not as a kind of a, you're not admonishing or scolding yourself, you're not saying you should be grateful. You're kind of reminding yourself, look, you've got a lot of supportive conditions here. Because all human beings, it seems, have a talent for feeling sorry for ourselves and for making excuses not to practice. I think we all have that gift. And because we have that gift, we have to challenge it, and we have to cultivate an ability to recognize our good fortune and the excuses, the reasons to practice, not the excuses not to practice. And so recognizing that you have the teachings, you have the temples, you have thinking, even things such as like making a nice shrine in a country like Australia, it's not easy. Getting the right type of incense or a nice type of flower. If you want to do some devotional practice to kind of uplift your heart, remember the Buddha, make some offerings. I mean, my friends took me to some shops, and you've got hundreds of varieties of incense that you can smell choose just the right one that you think creates a nice atmosphere. You can look for a Buddha statue which to you suggests the beautiful qualities of the Buddha. You don't have to order it online and hope that it looks as nice as it does in the picture. You can go and see it, hold it, touch it. And so there's a lot of resources. And I would encourage that. I would encourage people to make a nice shrine in their homes and to make some offerings to it. It's like, in terms of lifting up this energy of faith, like I guess I've been talking about some of the positives. One of the downsides, I guess, for Singapore and Singaporeans is people are busy, people work long hours. And so one of the questions then is how do working people integrate practice into their life? And there's some simple things that we can do. And I've been talking in most of my talks that I really recommend doing the meditation in the morning rather than the evening. If you leave the meditation till the end of the day, the mind tends to be tired. And ideally, we want to establish some clarity and some presence of mind so we can bring that mindfulness into our day and live our life more skillfully. We want to be training right thought, right speech, right action, and we need clarity to do that. And so meditating before sleeping, you might have a nice sleep, but you don't necessarily wake up with a lot of clarity. So I think it's normal for people who live in hot countries to want to sleep quite late because the weather cools down at night, and that's kind of a pleasant time to be out and about. But I would recommend for those of you who are interested in liberation, who are interested in realizing the results of this practice, that you get to bed a little bit earlier and get up a little bit earlier before the day gets busy. And I would also like to recommend that a lot of high-tech stuff, a lot of people work in IT and software, etc. And then so I would also suggest that you don't look at your devices in the morning, that you give yourself that first hour where you don't bring the whole world into consciousness, all the dramas, all the scandals, all the messages, all the whatever your friends are sending you, that you just wake up, wash your face, brush your teeth, and meditate. And don't look at these things yet. Put it on flight mode. So you're going on a journey inward, away from the world element towards the nibbana element. You put it on flight mode, and just give yourself that time. If the mind is drowsy in the morning, it's good to do some chanting. Do a little bit of chanting before the meditation. This is all the great monks that come and talk to you, that you pay respects to, the people you've seen over the years. That's how they trained themselves. They were getting up at 3, they were chanting at 3:30 for half an hour or 45 minutes, and then they were meditating. So we have to consider the examples of the great practitioners who we respect. How did they cultivate and purify their minds? How did they practice? And we take it as our example. So getting up a bit earlier, it doesn't have to be 3, it can be 5. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes of chanting, it can be 15. But 15 minutes of chanting and 45 minutes of sitting is a really good way to start the day. And making some offerings, offering some nice incense or some flowers, lighting candles. It's just a way of remembering that we love, respect, and are grateful to the Buddha. It's a way of not taking it for granted, recognizing and remembering our good fortune, recognizing and remembering our refuge, and affirming that refuge. And then do that practice. And then another important thing, of course, then is once you've done your sit, that you set the intention that throughout the day you will be trying to maintain your mindfulness. You don't just say, oh, that was nice peaceful sit, and then throw it out. It's like we actually do try to be aware of our footsteps, aware when you're opening and closing doors, aware when you're sitting, standing. Have some awareness in your body. Because if you can maintain some presence of mind in the body throughout its activities, when you come to meditate again later in the evening, hopefully, that's the next thing I want to talk about, is there's already some presence of mind there. The mind isn't completely exhausted or completely spent. And for those who want to generate great energy and great mindfulness in order to experience the bliss and wonderfulness of the samadhi, then it's really helpful if you can do more than one session a day. And in the beginning that might be hard. It might be hard in the beginning. So I'm not saying that you have to do an hour in the morning, an hour at night. If you can, that's great. But for those of you who are just kind of considering the idea of adding a second session, I would recommend a 45-minute session in the morning. Establish the clarity before you bring that into your day, and then try to sit for 15 minutes before sleeping. It's just kind of like you're starting and ending the day with the intention to establish and maintain clarity, mindfulness, truth-discerning awareness. And another thing I'd like to say about mindfulness in my experience of cultivating mindfulness as a bhikkhu, 26 years, is that it grows in power and strength when we're consistent. And unfortunately, it degenerates much more quickly than it can be generated. If you can be consistent with your meditation, and you really meditate every day, and you increase your number of sessions, over a period of months and years, you will become somebody who has a powerful quality of mindfulness. How will that manifest? That will manifest as having a sense of perspective, what they call truth-discerning awareness, sati sampajanya. It's like you'll just tend to notice if your mindset is wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome. The function of mindfulness is it knows qualities of things, it knows the truth of things. It's the opposite of delusion. Delusion is misapprehending, it's confused, it's based on ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing, avijja. Delusion is knowing confusedly, misapprehending, knowing deludedly. So mindfulness starts to see things truthfully, as they are. This is a wholesome mind state, this is an unwholesome mind state, this is a neutral mind state. And the more you meditate, the more that becomes obvious. And you'll start to be able to train yourself when it comes to right thought, right speech. It's like, don't obsess about this, it's not helpful. Or you might be about to say something and you can say, don't say that, that won't bring about a good result for you or them. And if we don't have much mindfulness, we might get irritated, we might get impatient, we might snap. And it's afterwards that we think, oh, that wasn't so skillful. If you have good mindfulness, you might notice there's some irritation, you might notice that it might be appropriate to say something, but you can start to ask yourself, when would be the right time to say it? In what manner? Maybe I should wait for my mood to cool down before I say anything. This is the kind of thing that people who cultivate mindfulness with metta, patience, etc., all of the qualities that consistent meditation bring about, you begin to have a lot more kind of mastery of your thoughts and of your speech and of your actions, and you begin to have a lot more choice. And when you have choice, you have more mastery, you're training yourself, then you're going to make a lot more good karma, and you're going to make a lot less bad karma. So right speech, skillful speech helps others as well. In terms of the insight, this is why we need to have the consistent mindfulness that gives rise to some stability of mind. When we begin to be able to investigate things like the nature of the body as elements, we can pick up actual contemplations, death and dying, and that focused contemplation with thought is digging into the darkness of the delusion and uprooting it, like scooping it out of the mind, and eventually can get powerful enough that insight can be direct, penetrative insight into the nature of things, the true nature of things, in a way that explodes ignorance out of the mind. And that's the way the Eightfold Path leads. It's my teacher Ajahn Anand says fairly frequently, the Eightfold Path isn't what we chant in the Dhammacakka Sutta, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappo, Samma Vajja, Samma Kammanto, etc. That's the description, that's the path we need to follow, but the Eightfold Path in actuality is qualities functioning in the mind. Right mindfulness is in the mind. When you have right mindfulness, it becomes possible to have right thought. When you have right mindfulness and right thought, it becomes possible to have right action. But if we don't establish that mindfulness, and if we don't have that right view, and if we don't have those right thoughts, then the Eightfold Path continues to be something that's in a book that we recite in a chant sometimes. But if the Eightfold Path is really powerful and functioning, it's in your mind turning. It's described as a wheel. When we understand the Eightfold Path and we're practicing the Eightfold Path, it's actually destroying delusion in the mind. The experience of destroying delusion is that you feel lighter, you feel brighter, your mind feels less oppressed by the power of greed and hatred. When we slip back in our practice and we don't do it, the Eightfold Path isn't turning in our mind, the power of the greed, hatred and the delusion increases, and there will be feelings of oppression in the heart and mind. So this is why we need to practice. This is why it's best if we can practice consistently. And Lompo Biek says, I know many people work late nights, I know sometimes there's overtime, I know there's, like I said, excuses not to practice, but we're talking about reasons to practice. And Lompo Biek actually says, a contemporary of Ajahn Anan is my main teacher. Lompo Biek and Ajahn Anan ordained together at Wat Pah Pong. Lompo Biek is also one of my teachers. He says it's actually best to sit, even if you're so tired that you're slumped over and dribbling, it's still better to sit. You don't have to maintain the appearance of sitting. But a lot of people don't want to do that because they think it looks disrespectful or it's uninspiring. But he says it's better to do it because at the very least you're establishing and maintaining this habit. And it might be the case that the next night when you come to sit, you feel tired, but the mind actually brightens up and becomes peaceful. If you have it as a practice, if you have it as something that you do every day, there will be the days when it is peaceful. And you're establishing this habit of the practitioner, the Dharma practitioner. And once you have that habit, of course, you can increase it. So you might realize, I'm sick of falling asleep on my meditation. Why don't I go and do it earlier when I'm not so tired? And we begin to make some kind of obvious observations, but sometimes we don't notice the obvious. But if you're sitting there and you're dribbling, after a couple of weeks you might say to yourself, hey, why don't I try half an hour earlier? And go to bed a bit earlier. And then if you've got this habit of sitting for 15 minutes, it's not very difficult to increase it to 20, and then after 6 months from 20 to half an hour. And most people, if they can do that, it's difficult in the beginning, but most people when they do that, they really see the benefit for themselves of what it's like to have more mindfulness, more clarity, more of a capacity to recognize an unskillful thought and actually let it go. Because everybody has some mindfulness, but our mindfulness tends to be a bit weak, a bit clouded, a bit scattered, not very powerful. If we want to have mindfulness as a spiritual power, then that's when we need to be consistent and we need to do more sessions more frequently. And then the mindfulness becomes powerful mindfulness. And the difference between weak and fuzzy mindfulness and powerful mindfulness is with weak and fuzzy mindfulness, you kind of know there's a negative mind state, you kind of know you probably shouldn't say it, but you say it anyway. And you kind of know you've eaten enough, but you want to eat more, so you do. And good mindfulness is like you're halfway through saying it and you realize, stop, don't do this. And as good mindfulness continues, you might be about to say it and you say to yourself, no, don't say this. If there's some kind of recognition that this may not help the situation. If it's not going to help the situation, it's better to stay silent. And you allow the feeling of irritation to arise and cease in your mind without making the karma of speech. So right mindfulness brings great benefits in our lives. And then when we go and sit, we don't have to feel bad about what we said in a moment of irritation and impatience. So we don't have the remorse. It's a gift of the freedom of remorse. You're less reactive, less irritable, less angry. And then you hurt other people's feelings less. And then it actually starts to get really interesting when you cultivate more and more mindfulness and you set the intention, I'm going to be more careful with my thoughts, I'm going to be more careful with my speech. And when you start to be able to contain negative reactions and reflect around them, and it becomes possible Suppose in the past you might have reacted unskillfully and hurt a person's feelings, and then you don't like them, they don't like you. And suppose you know you have to say something, it's a bit tricky, but then you're able to ask yourself, well, what's the best way to say it? What's the right time to say it? Make sure you say it when you don't have any negative feelings there. And then the person that you're talking to might not even know that they offended you. They might not even know that you were upset. And the way that you describe it to them may actually help them make some adjustments, make them a more functional, skillful person in their life. Your practice can become a way of modestly, subtly, skillfully training others without them even knowing it. You're behaving as a spiritual friend. And all of this is possible. But it does take the commitment to establishing that clarity and that presence of mind and being consistent with it. And as I said earlier, unfortunately, it can degenerate quite quickly, and it can take quite a bit of time to get really clear and really powerful. But then suppose a significant drama happens in your life, or you really have to work really hard, or there's some illness in the family, or problems with the kids, or whatever. We need to recognize if our practice has slipped. We need to recognize if our mindfulness isn't very good anymore, and then we need to try to pick it up as quickly as possible. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is signing up for a retreat. Do a retreat or go to a monastery, recharge, re-establish the clarity as quickly as you can. Recognize when things slip back, and then get back with the program, as it were. And for myself now, I've been meditating for nearly 30 years. And frequent meditation throughout the day is just simply a part of my life. I don't have to force myself to do it. I enjoy it. I want to do it. I've been here in Singapore teaching, visiting friends, having invitation meals, but it's basically just a part of the day. Wake up, do some meditation. Shun Xiang takes us for breakfast. After breakfast, myself and Venerable Tisero, we've been going to the Burmese temple. We're in the novena area. And on the third floor, a very lovely meditation hall. And we've been meditating there. Then we go to an invitation meal. In the afternoon, my students ask me, where do you want to go, Ajahn? I want to go to a temple where I can meditate. So they take me to a temple, and we meditate. And for myself, I don't care if it's Theravada, Mahayana, or Vajrayana. I like it if it's air-conditioned. Yesterday we went to, what was the name of the temple we went to yesterday? I can't hear you. Shuat Lin. Yeah, and we turned up in time for the afternoon puja, an hour and a half of chanting, and I just sat for an hour and a half listening to the ambience of monks chanting. And again, I was talking about like the good fortune that Singaporeans have. I've been to China a couple of times, and when I walk into this temple, which is 125 years old, it's like walking into China. And there's the old ladies waving their incense and putting on their black smocks, and it's like, there's a certain ambience, a certain kind of a good energy that has seeped into the trees and the rocks and the statues. And you have this as a resource. You can just go there on a Sunday afternoon and meditate. And it's like a little mini pilgrimage. So I've been doing that. We've been to all sorts of places. We went to the Taiwanese temple, and we went to the Amitabha Buddhist Center, and we basically go somewhere in the afternoon and meditate again. Then come and teach some people, have a guided meditation. Go back before sleeping, we'll have a meditation. And it's not, I don't have to force myself to meditate, because I recognize that when you don't meditate, it's natural for an experience of more clutter, a little bit more darkness. And then when you meditate, you're kind of sweeping out the clutter, brightening the mind, putting down the darkness. It's pleasant. But for meditation to become pleasant, for meditation to become second nature, for meditation to become something that we want to do without forcing ourselves, in the beginning we have to. We do have to establish the habit. And then at a certain point, that habit will carry the practice. And so for myself, I kind of check, I'm an abbot, I'm a teacher, sometimes there is busyness. And I've just trained myself to notice when I wake up in the morning, can I feel the first in-breath? Normally I can. And then when I go to the bathroom, I just notice, I'm not forcing myself, I just notice, can I feel the feelings at the bottom of the feet? Normally I can. And there's a reason I can. It's because it's my practice to meditate before my arms round, to feel my footprints on the alms round, to meditate after the alms round, do some work, greet some guests, chat with people. There'll be more meditation in the afternoon, there'll be an evening chanting, more meditation. And so with this frequent meditation throughout the day, if I'm now talking, when I'm listening to one of my students, one of my friends, during the time that they're talking to me, I can feel my in and out breathing. It's just there. It's because I've established awareness of the breath as my main practice. When I'm not talking, I can feel my breath. And when one can maintain some mindfulness consistently like this, when it comes time to meditate, it doesn't take that long for the mind to become peaceful, because there's already some presence of mind. And it hasn't been completely scattered and distracted. And I know it is more difficult for people who have office jobs who really have to put a lot of attention into these screens. It's harder. I do recognize that. But if we can start our day with meditation, end our day with meditation, and find these little opportunities to kind of, get out of your habits. I'm going to keep repeating. I think you're really fortunate. You just need to jump in a car or on public transport, and within an hour you can be in an ancient temple or a meditation center with a peaceful hall. It's not difficult for you people to go somewhere where there's good energy, absorb those blessings, put your daily life down, get some help not being distracted. This is tremendous merit that I believe you have. And go to the Burmese temple and meditate. Go to the Chinese temple and listen to the chanting. And just do these things like little drops of water filling up that bucket of faith, inspiration, consistency, determination, and make your life a devoted, sacred journey where the Buddha describes different beings in samsara. Some as like going from dark to darkness, some going from light to darkness, some going from darkness to light, and others that go from light to light. And you're probably the people that you're in a light situation, I would say, and you want to go from light to light, because it's very rare in the world that you have very good practitioners coming and encouraging you consistently where you are. There's not many places where that happens. I would say even for the average Thai person, they would not get the same chance to listen to as much Dharma as you people do. And you don't know that, because you probably take it for granted. But if they have to work, and there's a great teacher a few provinces away, but they can't get away from work. They can't do it. Or it's harvesting time, or it's ploughing time, and they just need to be in the fields. And you guys, you just need to get in your car, and you're here. So that's I rejoice in your merit. I believe you have great merits. And but we all need to recognize our merits, and then it's like we have our inheritance from past goodness, and we need to reinvest it. Yeah, and the good news is that as ethnically Chinese people, you have a good reputation. You are capable of being very disciplined. You are capable of working hard. You're capable of focusing. You are capable of investing. So, invest in your spiritual practice and be disciplined in your spiritual practice. I offer these reflections for your benefit. I hope something I said was helpful.
Sadhu, sadhu.